me on Skype, I'm joined by James Campbell from Shefa Yamim. James, good to see you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andrew. I hope you're well.
And you, James. Look, we've got the technical economic evaluation out today on the Kishon Mid Reach Zone 1. Before we discuss some of the findings and some of the results here and what it's telling us, as far as the commissioning of the report and its objective, essentially to put some numbers around the capex and the opex of getting into production here.
Absolutely, Andrew. Many companies like Shefa Yamim firstly undertake something like a technical and economic evaluation, as it gives indicative operating and capital costs without a resource. Many of our investors and listeners and viewers will be very familiar with the terms such as preliminary economic assessment, pre-feasibility study, feasibility study, but all of those require either an inferred or an indicated study on the resource. And that's something we quite haven't got yet. So the management of Shefa Yamim decided, let's get a first cast look at what are the operating and capital cost parameters for the Shefa Yamim Mid-Reach project, in the full knowledge that we've made fantastic progress with both the volume estimate and the grade estimate too.
And James, some of the main findings, talk us through it.
Well, when we had the kickoff workshop for the technical economic evaluation, we determined a model plant rate of 50 tons per hour over the whole of the life of mine, which comes in at just over 10 years, in fact, 11 years. We looked at a fairly elementary surface mining technique, followed by a fairly standard process again for the treatment of gravels coming from the mid-reach. The treatment of these was a scrubbing, screening, and dense media separation process, followed by hand sorting. Of course, the main outcomes of this report, which would be of interest to investors, would be the estimated capital and operating cost parameters. From an operating cost parameter perspective, running at 50 tons per hour, we were looking at round about $27 per ton. But if we actually flex that number to round about 100 tons per hour or more, that operating cost could well go down to between $10 and $15 per ton. And that's something that we're certainly going to be looking at over the period of time. There is also the capital cost estimates we looked at using new equipment, and let me emphasize new equipment, which is not something that Shefa Yamim would contemplate, and I can touch on that a bit later. But we're looking at around about $11 million for a brand new processing plant and mining operation, and then $7.5 million if we were to do contract mining, which is something that many miners actually contemplate.
That figure that's stated in the announcement here, the OPEX of $26, $27 a tonne, how does that compare? Where does that sit on the spectrum?
Well, most precious stones miners are north of $30 per tonne. So from a Shefa Yamim perspective, it puts us at the lower end of the cost curve, particularly in that we have significant opportunity to reduce that to $10 to $15 per tonne by merely doubling the plant rate at 100 tons per hour. And 100 tons per hour, if we look at across other different precious stones and diamond mining companies, is not a very large tonnage. So the economies of scale that can be borne to bear on this particular project are quite exciting.
There's been some quite significant investment already been made, hasn't there, in terms of the processing plant and machinery?
Andrew, absolutely. And this is something management's actually currently looking at. The TEE study was focused on a baseline case. What is the baseline operating and capital cost environment in an ideal world? We all know we don't live in the ideal world. And Andrew, as you quite rightly said, we've invested significantly in processing capacity at our Akko facility just south of Haifa. And we believe with fairly minimal modifications, we can adjust that processing capacity to meet the target 100 tons per hour and thus gain the economies of scale to mine at between $10 and $15 per ton.
So you're pretty encouraged with the report and what it's found?
Yes, I'm very encouraged, Andrew. And if I touch on momentarily on why we selected Paradigm Project Management to actually draft the report, the Paradigm Project Management is led by a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Clark. He's not only a ex-consulting metallurgist to De Beers, a fellow of the Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Materials, chartered engineer, and a whole host of other wonderful things. But he was also one of the earlier chief executive officers of Gemfields. And you go a long way to find somebody who has got deep technical and business experience in the precious stone space, in addition to diamonds. So he was very much the ideal person to tackle this report. And in fact, I've worked with him previously when I was managing director of African Diamonds, and we were able to deliver a groundbreaking technical design to what is now the Karowe processing plant.
Indeed, so the right team for the job here, James. So with this in hand, this report, where to from here?
Yes, there are a number of different jigsaw puzzles one has to put together when looking at a resource company. What Shefa Yamim has been focused on up until this particular point has been very correctly the geology, and then flowing from that, the grade of the precious stones themselves, as well as the volume of the deposit itself. Allied in that with the technical economic assessment, we now have capital and operating cost parameters. So the final piece of the jigsaw is the dollar per carat. You know, what are the precious stones actually worth? And you, listeners and investors would know that we commissioned world famous Yossi Harari to look at the precious stones themselves and to design some jewelry. And when that is announced, we'll start to get indicative values in terms of dollar per carat. And everything actually goes back to dollar per ton as such. And multiplying the dollar per carat from the precious stones by the carats per 100 tons, you'll get your dollar per ton income, and one can compare that with the dollar per ton operating costs and thus begin to see what your operating margins are.
And the idea here, hitting trial mining before the end of the year, is that still the plan?
That's absolutely the case. You know, although the Yossi Harari exercise will give us indicative numbers, and although the technical economic assessments has given us indicative numbers, the way that we actually will essentially prove the project, obviously assuming initial commerciality, is through trial mining and then ramping up to full-scale mining during the course of the next couple of years.
Is there any urgency or in fact any need to establish a resource here for Zone 1?
Actually, Andrew, it's a very good question. If you look at most alluvial diamond mining companies, they typically do a lot of work at the deposit level, which we've done, and then do as much work as they can to get to an inferred resource. And in the diamond terminology, you need 500 carats from a grade and valuation perspective. You will well know that we've recovered well in excess of 10,000 carats from Shefa Yamim. So from a grade perspective, we've done extremely well. We need to tighten up the value estimates, and this is where our work with Yossi Harari is coming in. So most alluvial diamond miners and alluvial precious stones miners possibly have elements of an inferred resource, then go into trial mining to actually prove commerciality.
Very good, James. Look, just before I let you go, so a busy year ahead clearly for yourself and the team here at Shefa Yamim. You're in Cape Town at the Indaba Mining Conference. How's it been? How have the last couple of days been for you?
Well, Andrew, it is 35 degrees centigrade here in Cape Town. It is very hot. And the theme of the Mining Indaba in Cape Town is investing in Africa. So we have a large contingent of obviously African exploration and mining companies, suppliers, government members, and then of course the investment community from the UK, where I believe it's quite cold, Canada, Australia and New York. And Cape Town in February is just a magnificent place to be. Interestingly, the mood has begun to become a little bit more positive. Now, we obviously saw during the course of 2018, particularly towards the end of the year, that resource sector was beginning to come out of favor a little bit. But with strong demand coming out of the United States for precious stones and diamonds, and most mining companies and commodities sitting probably at the bottom end of the cycle, there was a bit of renewed optimism and a scent or a smell of deals being done, which is very positive.
It certainly is. James, I'll let you go, but look, thanks very much for your time. Great to see you.
Thank you very much indeed for the interview, Andrew, and all the best.